I am Dana Nessel, Michigan Attorney General, and today I'm announcing the release of a report by my department concerning allegations of clergy abuse that took place in the Diocese of Lansing. Since taking office in 2019, I have pledged to use the resources of my department to ensure that cases of abuse and assault are thoroughly reviewed and that whenever we're able to pursue criminal charges, we do so relentlessly and aggressively. Our additional promise to the many victims throughout the clergy, I'm sorry, can you just hold, please? Can you just, okay. Sorry, there's some background noise here. Our additional promise to the many victims throughout the clergy abuse investigation was to make the results of the investigation transparent at its completion. And to that end, this is the fourth of 7 reports that we're now releasing. We will release a report for each of the 7 dioceses of the Catholic Church here in Michigan. Now, previously, we released our reports on the Marquette Diocese in October of 2022, Gaylord in January of this year, and then Kalamazoo in May. These reports are important, not just because we made a promise to the survivors of these abuses years ago, but because victims, especially in cases like these, where the assaults were perpetrated by entrusted members of a community, are so often silenced, in some cases for decades or even a lifetime. By publishing these reports, we are sharing their stories and validating their experiences. Criminal prosecutions are just one accountability metric. By ensuring that each victim is heard, regardless of how long ago their assault may have been, it's important in acknowledging their pain and fostering a culture that prioritizes these victims over their silence. The Lansing Diocese report is a compilation of the information obtained by my department: tip line, victim interviews, police investigations, open source media, paper documents seized from the diocese, and electronic documents that were found on the diocesan computers, as well as reports of allegations disclosed by the diocese. Lansing agreed to provide reports of abuse directly to the Department of Attorney General. Victims often reach out to their faith leaders to share stories of abuse, and the willingness and cooperation from the Diocese of Lansing to provide information was instrumental in the compilation of this report. Of the 1,172 tips that we received, 161 of them were related to Lansing, with 44 coming from the diocese itself. 24 of the 220 boxes of paper documents and over 760,000 of the 3.5 million electronic documents we received were also related to the Diocese of Lansing. The list of allegations of sexual misconduct by priests against either children or adults contained within this report dates all the way back to January 1st, 1950, and is derived from information gleaned from a search warrant that was executed against the diocese on October 3rd of 2018. The report contains detailed descriptions of allegations of sexual abuse and other sexual crimes against minors and adults. And I would note that a criminal charge, of course, is merely an allegation, and a defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in a court of law. The Lansing report identifies 56 people, which includes 48 priests, 3 religious brothers and an apparent former religious brother, and 4 deacons. 42 were ordained or incarnated by the Diocese of Lansing. 29 of those named are also listed on either a local diocese or the Bishop Accountability site, and 3 were prosecuted by my department. The defendants that were prosecuted were Joseph Compercio Jr., Timothy Crowley, and Vincent Anthony DiLorenzo. This report represents countless hours of work and dedication since the department first executed search warrants as part of the clergy abuse investigation. And I want to commend the Michigan State Police and, of course, my dedicated staff on their unwavering commitment to seeing justice served in these tremendously difficult cases. I especially want to thank the survivors of this abuse who have willingly shared their stories, sometimes after many decades of suffering silence. Their willingness to come forward helped bring attention to an issue that has affected so many in our state and our country, including children. As part of my clergy abuse investigation to date, my department has issued criminal charges at 11 cases and secured convictions in 9, resulting in justice for at least 38 survivors. Completed the paper document review of the diocese, reviewing more than 1.5 million documents. Completed the electronic document review of more than 3.5 million documents. Hired and trained a full-time victim advocate to support the hundreds of victims identified in the course of this investigation. Continued to refer the completed criminal investigations back to the respected diocese and followed up with victims who have not been interviewed by law enforcement with a trauma-informed, victim-centered interviewer. If you have information about abuse in the Catholic Church, please call my department's hotline at 844-324-3374. Victims of sexual abuse or sexual assault in need of additional resources may also contact 855-VOICES-SR. We must break down the walls of silence that so often surround sexual assault and abuse. And in the end, we hope this report provides a voice to those who have suffered in silence for so long and shines a light on those alleged offenders whose actions allowed them to evade true accountability. And now I'm going to be happy to take questions about this, and I'll note that I'm going to have on here with me Danielle Hageman-Clark, who is the chief of our criminal bureau and has overseen this entire investigation and project, and we thank her for her many countless tireless hours working on these cases. So with that, happy to answer questions.
Thank you, AJ. If you can use the raise hand function again if you have any questions, and I will call on you. Seeing none. Oh, hold on. Deanna, can you please state your outlet when you ask your question?
Yes. Hello. My name is Deanna. I'm with News 10. Sorry for the other emoji I put up there, but I would like to ask if there are any investigations that are currently still open. Like, are there still claims that you all are looking at as you continue your reports?
Danielle, I'll let you go ahead and respond to that.
Yes, we do have open investigations.
All right.
Okay. Any other questions?
I did have one other question, if I may.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Aside from that, how does so I know there's the statute of limitations when it comes to coming forward regarding sexual abuse claims, and I know the Justice for Survivors bills just passed. How does that help victims who may have been sexually abused by a diocese, or specifically the Lansing Diocese?
Right. Well, I will say this. First of all, in terms of the statute of limitations for criminal cases, I believe if these are passed and signed in the law, then it will elongate the amount of time moving forward. We can't do this going backwards, but we can do it going forward. So it wouldn't affect these cases, but it could affect similar cases in the future. And Danielle, if I'm not mistaken, on the criminal front, it would establish a lengthier period of statute of limitations on criminal sexual conduct second and third degree. Is that correct?
Yes, it would bring CSC second and third in line with CSC 1, which has abolished the statute of limitations.
Right.
But they currently, and it gets confusing, but if a victim is under the age of 18, then this criminal statute of limitations is 15 years or the victim's 28th birthday. If a victim is over the age of 18, it's 10 years or the 21st birthday.
Okay. But that is prospective. So it's not, you can't go back because it would be unconstitutional likely to do that. But for civil cases, there is also a component of these bills that would, again, establish a lengthier period of statute of limitations, and that I believe has a look back component to it. But I don't want to get into the details of it because, frankly, nothing's been signed into law yet. There's a lot of things you might have noticed happening with lame duck right now. So I think it'd be premature for us to speculate how, if at all, it would impact civil cases because, again, things are sort of all over the place. But I know that that's a component of the bills as well.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Zachary Priest. Zachary, can you say which outlet you're with when you ask your question, please?
Yeah, I'm with Channel 6, and I wanted to know, so I know you mentioned that phone number. Could you just say that again? And then also, what other resources are there available for victims to reach out to?
Right. Danielle, I'll let you go ahead and answer that.
Sure. The 1-855 Voices 4 is Michigan's 24-hour a day, 7-day a week open hotline for anybody at any time who is seeking just somebody to talk to. The Michigan Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence, ALTSL, is the state provider of referrals to local advocacy centers. If anybody needs to speak with somebody, they can call the Voices 4 to speak with someone or the coalition to be able to get resources in their area of the state.
Thank you. Jan Hewitt is sending a question via text, via chat, so we're going to give him a second to get that into the chat. Oh, John, it looks like you're unmuted if you want to ask.
I'm hoping you can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you.
Well, excellent. Forgive me for being rudimentary here because we have some new equipment we're working through. So I apologize for the ham-handedness here. Thanks for the opportunity. I had two questions, please. I'll go back and sift through the figures you gave, Dana, but were those pertaining to all of the investigations, just the Lansing Diocese? Can you clarify the numbers you were sharing?
Yeah, I think that we provided numbers for both of those things. But Danielle, do you want to go ahead and elaborate?
Sure. So there were 1.5 million paper documents for the entire investigation. 60,000 of those related specifically to the Diocese of Lansing. There were 3.5 million digital documents and upwards of 750,000 digital documents related just to the Lansing Diocese.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification. And as you talk about kind of fourth of 7 reports, I don't know what your timing is expected to be in the subsequent reports coming, but also how would you share the cooperation of the diocese on this? I'd love a little more extended comment in regard to over the course of this, how they've been to work with.
Yeah, so let me answer that second part first. And that's that we've been really pleased with the cooperation that we've received from the Lansing Diocese. And as you could see from my earlier statements, a lot of the information we received is because of them. They're the ones who forwarded that information to us. And they've really been great to work with. And important to note that because, in the beginning of this investigation, when I first took office in 2019, we had quite a number of issues with a lot of the dioceses that we were investigating, and we got a lot of pushback. And really, I would say that's changed over the course of time. And I think there's been a great appreciation that, these dioceses see these offenses continue to occur either. And they want to make sure that there's some accountability. So, we've been really happy and we feel like things are going to really change, I hope, moving forward. And I think that's reflected by, again, the, significant cooperation that we've received, especially from the Lansing Diocese. In terms of the timeline of the outstanding reports, Danielle, can you give us some information on that?
Sure. We hope to release the Grand Rapids report this spring, the Saginaw report this fall, and then Detroit will be sometime in 2026.
Can I sneak one more in if you still have me?
Sure.
Dana, dovetailing off of what you just talked about, and I know preceding you arriving in office for decades, I'm looking for kind of an overarching characterization. You feel or said things are getting better, cooperation is better. I'm thinking along the lines of people not being afraid to talk and to come forward. I mean, obviously, when you mentioned that this goes back to 1950 for some of these, for decades, this was forbidden to even talk about, let alone have, the courage to come forward. Do you think that nut has cracked? Are we finally past that point? Do you still have concerns even today, that this continues and people are afraid to talk, or do you feel like we've reached a new day?
I hope that we've reached a new day. Certainly, like I said, the cooperation that we've received in regard to this report, I think, is reflective of a very, a seriousness with which the diocese are approaching these sorts of complaints, and the intolerance now in terms of how one would approach an abuser. That at one time, of course, the modus operandi was sort of to silence that individual, sometimes by use of non-disclosure agreements, and then just to transfer wayward clergy members, from diocese to diocese in the hopes that nobody would know, nobody would find out. And we're not seeing that anymore. I think there's been something significant, a significant change that's occurred. I'm going to let Danielle speak a little bit more to that in a second, but I would say from a societal standpoint, though, you might have heard me talk a little bit, and this is not really off topic, but I've been disappointed in some of the cabinet picks by the incoming Trump administration involving people who have been, credibly accused of sexual assault or aiding and abetting in sexual assault. I think it's so important that we send this continuous message, an unwavering message, that offenses involving sexual assault will not be permitted in any realm of life. And whether that's in parishes around the state and country, or whether it's in our government, that it should never be tolerated anywhere, and that victims should always feel comfortable coming forward and making those reports, and to know that those claims of sexual assault and abuse will be taken seriously. Danielle, do you have anything more to comment on?
I would just add that because sexual assault often happens to the most vulnerable people in our society, delayed disclosure and reporting that abuse is always going to occur. And that doesn't mean that it isn't true. It just means that is a victim is not comfortable moving forward or even telling anybody about it until they're ready. And so I do think that we've gotten to a point where folks who want to disclose feel like they can. But I think we should recognize that there are many people who have been sexually assaulted who will never disclose that. And that simply is, I think, a personal choice. And as a prosecutor, our job is to listen to those reports when they come into law enforcement and decide whether or not we can move forward to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think has been really important about this project. It's not just in terms of investigating these cases to find out whether there is corroborating evidence, whether the victim feels comfortable coming forward and testifying in open court. Sometimes they just want help. They just want assistance. And we have to respect that choice. Even in the face of overwhelming guilt, we have to say, all right, we're going to have a victim-centered, trauma-informed approach. And if what they want is just assistance to help them in their life, then that's what we're going to provide to them.
So our last question from Haywood with WLNS might kind of overlap a little bit on the answers. The review of allegations includes instances of responsible persons minimizing, denigrating, and shaming the survivors as they reported. Can the AG please speak to this and what survivors today?
That's a good question. Danielle, I'm going to let you handle this.
Kim, can you repeat it? On my end, it broke up just a little bit.
Yep. This review of allegations includes instances of responsible persons minimizing, denigrating, and shaming the survivors as they reported. Can the AG please speak to this and what survivors today can do?
Sure. So I think if I understood your question correctly, it's that the report encapsulates or has instances where victims were not believed, they were denigrated, made to feel badly about the reports. I believe, based on our relationship and what I have seen working with the Diocese of Lansing, that has changed. We have not, at least in my role, I have not heard of victims feeling that way recently in regards to reports to the Diocese of Lansing. Now, can it happen? Sure. That they're a separate entity. our job really has been to look at what we've seen and try to report it out accurately and fairly. And that's what we've done here today. I think survivors should recognize and understand that when they report to the Attorney General's office, they will be treated with respect. I think it is fair to say that if they reach out to the Diocese of Lansing, they will be treated fairly. My hope is that anybody who reports a sexual assault, no matter who they report it to, whether it's a family member, a school teacher, a police officer, clergy member, family friend, that they are treated with respect.
With that, thank you guys so much. If you have any further questions, please email agpress@mi.gov. Thank you.